we're all ready, I'll call this meeting to order. Carla, can we do roll call, please?
Commissioner Long. Here. Commissioner Berman.
Here.
Commissioner Savage. Vice Chair Moffitt.
Here.
Chair Gilardi.
Here. Item 3, excuse me, land acknowledgement. The city of Cotati recognizes that we're on ancestral lands of the coastal Miwok, who are the original caretakers of this area. We respectfully acknowledge indigenous people who have been stewarding and maintaining the relationship of this land as knowledge keepers for millennia. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a gesture of respect to the land we are on. Now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the November 4th meeting?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Item 6, changes to the agenda. Noah, any?
There's no changes this evening.
Thank you. Item 7, public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the commission on any items listed on the matters at hand or matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter of jurisdiction of the commission may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the commission is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any items not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Code 2023-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes per length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any item, any and all items on the matters at hand. The chair may extend the limit time for a reasonable time where a distinguishable accommodation has been requested. Seeing no members in the public, Carla, do we have anyone online who would like to address us?
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Lori, you have the floor.
Hi. I just wanted to make sure you all got my written comment that I sent in to Carla yesterday. Thank you.
Yes, we got that. Thank you. Anyone else, Carla?
Chair Gilardi, that will end public comment.
Thank you. Item 8, matters at hand. Public review of the 35% complete Highway 116 West Cotati Avenue intersection safety improvements project design.
Public Works Director Craig Scott has this item.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Planning Commission. Craig Scott, Public Works Director, City Engineer. Helping on this item to present is James Hanley. He's with the consultant Mark Thomas. The project is Highway 116 West Cotati Avenue intersection safety project has proposed improvements to Highway 116 to add a median lane, turn lanes, bike and pedestrian facilities, a raised median from all the way from Redwood Drive to past about 500 feet past Alder Avenue. And then the project includes a realignment of the West Cotati Avenue as it intersects with Highway 116 and includes a Class 1 multi-use pathway along the north side of Highway 116 for that whole stretch. So we're bringing this forward before this body for your role as a Bike Ped Advisory Committee, and it's a project update. The project has begun Caltrans review process, so be aware that any revisions in the plans at this stage would need to have their approval. The 35% was a thorough process to get to this point over 2.5 years. And that included having experts in CEQA and bike and pedestrian safety guide the design with input from the public and staff. Go ahead and change. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the project, I advance it to the next slide, please.
Sorry, I'm trying
No.
to. It's not working.
Okay. There you go. Right, so as the project highlights, the project, well, was highlighted in the local road safety plan, which was done in 2021, and specifically was called out as one of 5 projects in that plan, and that was due to the collision history. The ATP, which followed the local road safety plan and was adopted just this past year, I mean, just a few months ago, shows how the proposed Highway 116 corridor improvements are part of this planned citywide projects to improve the bike ped network. Okay, then so the planning has incorporated and identified this project as a priority. Intrinsic to that intersection, it's problematic, right? Because it comes into Highway 116 as an acute angle. So that poses challenges to safety and operations of that intersection. Sight lines are impaired, and as you're coming through, it's really awkward at that angle. So that intrinsically is calling for that intersection to be pulled in, reconfigured at a right angle. And then, so that configuration has been around for a long, for decades, right? Fixing this intersection and making improvements along Highway 116 has been a barrier over decades for development of those lands to the north of Highway 116. And the improvements would enable the residents of those future developments to enter and leave that development safely. Going back even further, the city's general plan includes the project, and it's also included in the traffic impact fee study that we have. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so before I hand it off to James, I'd like to just review the public outreach. So for the local road safety plan, there were discussions of the reconfiguration. One of the early concept drawings of that intersection, what we plan to do with it, was presented to the public at a workshop in 2021. Then it was highlighted as one of the projects in the active transportation plan in 2023 workshop. Concept was presented to the Planning Commission in June of 2023, and then the 35% was just recently presented to City Council back in, well, it's presented now obviously, but it was presented at City Council for approval of the design back in September, just this past September. So that serves as a background, and at this point, I'd like to hand it over to James, who will be diving a little bit deeper into the design and the technical aspects of the project.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thanks, James.
You guys all hear me? You guys can all hear me, correct? Yeah.
Needs to be up.
Great. Next slide, if you don't mind. Actually, I think there's one more here that just kind of goes over, goes over where this fits into the planned corridor projects as well. We can quickly go over this. But, this has been planned in from the beginning, and it's been a planned bikeway and corridor project. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So just talking through the schedule, I know we came back here, we were here a year ago, and so now we're fully into the Caltrans approval process. Really on the critical path, I mean, for right now, we're in design, and we're hoping to get the design process completed by the end of 2025 for construction in 2026. And in order to get there, really the critical path is coming down the Caltrans approval process. Recently, just last week, we met with Caltrans twice, not once, but twice. We met with all their functional heads, and then we met again with the main project delivery people to make sure everything was good. And we're on track to make that happen, to get this through design by 2025 and get into construction with 2026. And to make that happen, we're actually going to move some stuff up, and we're going to go into final design really starting in early 2025. We're hoping to get 65s, I believe, somewhere around March. Still kind of working through that because we're just trying to push through it. Another issue that came up is the resource agency permits. We're gonna be beginning to engage with those approving agencies early in 2025. Again, there's some issues around there, and so we want to get in with those resource agency permits as fast as possible. Those federal permitting agencies. Next slide. So getting into the project design, so I just wanted to highlight, I know the 35% were circulated around. I just wanted to highlight a couple things here. That may not have been in the previous presentations, or more of the concept 10% designs, and only 35% designs can really show them. So one of the things here, you see these arrows. First of all, we added curb in the median. I know that's not everywhere. It's not necessarily required, but it's really a space consideration in this right-of-way, in those two lines there, and exactly what we can fit in there. And we tried to maximize the safety improvements as much as possible in there. And so we have these curb medians, and there's 6-foot medians on the south side. And I think they might be 4 feet on the east side. And I think they might be 4 feet on the west side. I think they're still 6. I can't really tell based on those numbers. But we tried to do these to channelize the cars into the turn pockets, into the through lanes. And when you add these curbs, it also kind of slows cars down. And you'll notice on the next slide that we don't really have that as we get closer to 101, and it allows cars to go all different directions. So we really wanted to add these median curbs and this median as a whole. And then up there on the north, we had what's called a habitat median, which is it's really going to end up being a stormwater quality feature, but it provides some more separation from that Class 1 bike lane, and gets us some more separation and some more safety improvements. And then I know one of the issues was at the end, how do we make this project fit in with the overall plan? And so you'll see there right at the end is you'll see these ends. So we have this Class 1 bike lane, and then we provided this crosswalk striping that will hopefully, we're not going to continue westbound, but as we continue westbound, we're hoping that it'll kind of allow bikers to get into that shoulder that's there on the westbound Route 116 and keep on going. And as bikers come in on the eastbound 116, we kept this southbound lane, and this was previously in the concept as well, or in the 10% concept as well, but we kept that southbound lane so that bikers can continue over. We don't try to make them cross over to the Class 1 bike path, and we kept on going through there. So if you go to the next slide. And then, so this is the continuation. Again, there's more details. There's a lot more details in the 35% plans, but these PD sheets show it quite well. And you can kind of see there's some stuff to work out. 35% design. We try to solve most of the problems. We don't solve them all. So that Class 1 bike path, it kind of dead ends into the sidewalk there. We're still trying to work through how do we get bikers onto the Class 1 path. And then the same thing on the south side. We're kind of working through how do we make bikers enter the lanes and get to the Redwood Drive intersection well. And as you can see right there at the end, we get back to that spacing constraint about maximizing, and we weren't able to really fit a median there in Redwood Drive. We have the space at the new intersection, but as we come through and we go to Redwood Drive and we get closer and closer to Redwood Drive, when we're trying to open up in those turn pockets with those two existing curbs on both sides, we get really space constrained, and unfortunately, as much as we'd like to, we can't add, the channelization safety improvements of the median curb. So next slide. And then, as a general overview, I just wanted to give a nice close up of the intersection itself to show you kind of this is relatively close to the concept you've seen previously, but I just wanted to point out that on the south side, we have the 6 foot, we have the 6 foot bike lane, then we have another 2 foot buffer. And then we have our through lane, we're maintaining our through lane, and then we have our left turn pocket. And then we have our median, and then we only have one more lane there with a shoulder. So we tried to keep it, we opened up the intersection as much as we could to get those dedicated turn pockets and those dedicated lanes. But we also try to keep it as compact as possible so that we slow the speeds down as much as possible, and protect bikers and protect pedestrians. Next slide. And so I know there's been a lot of discussion about what exactly are the best improvements. And the thing is, when we put a full controlled intersection, we can actually do a lot with the signal design itself to help out and kind of control the conflicting movements between the two. And so some of the things that we included are these left turns at approaches, the lead and lag phasing, so that's clearing out one queue and then letting them go, so there's a delay. No right, and some of this was in the previous concepts. No right turn, no red signal, so you can run on the outside lane without creating conflicts. Dedicated bike signal heads, and then this is actually just pretty standard across the board, but leading pedestrian intervals where we ask the pedestrians to cross first, and there's a little bit of delay between when the cars are allowed to go and when the pedestrians are allowed to go, so that the pedestrians get out and they take that open space right away, and so there's not the conflicting movement with that right turn, because the right turn, in order to make that right turn, they have to see the pedestrian's already out in front of it. Next slide. So in conclusion, the key takeaways, as of right now, the project remains on track for Caltrans gear approval and resource agency permits. We've included as many design refinements to prioritize safety and operational improvements. And as we move forward, the biggest thing is maintaining those critical path milestones, especially regarding Caltrans coordination and permitting schedules. The real goal here is to get a project moving forward and to get it through Caltrans as fast as possible, within their procedures. So with that, next slide. I'll take any questions and any public comment, and myself included. So.
Thank you, James. Are there any questions from the commission?
Is there going to be another chance to?
I'm sorry?
Will there be another chance to ask questions?
Yeah. I don't think we have any additional questions for you, James. Thank you. Do we have questions from the community?
Yes, thank you, Chair Gilardi. Lori, you have the floor. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, hey, good evening, Planning Commission, and surprise, surprise, I'm up here paying attention. Very good to hear that presentation on the 35%. I think that's the first time I've actually heard it come through, and I really do appreciate there's a lot of work that's gone into it. I'm really paying attention on the pedestrian and the bicycle side, because that's not what a lot of people do. I think there's some great traffic connections there that sit with the current road, but when it comes to pedestrians, I mean, I think the emphasis that's being talked about has been the aspect of a quick connection for pedestrians across there. But I'd come back to that question I've been asking all the time about that central median. In the design documents, it's talked about as being 6 foot wide. The Federal Highways Manual talks about it going up to 8 feet. I'm glad it's not just me who hasn't been able to see the width of it on the documents, because I couldn't find that, and I've been asking that question. What is the minimum width, really, that's going to be? Because when we get out there and find that the contractors have squeezed it to the minimum, that's not going to be very good. There is a book that I've been reading, Death by Traffic Engineer, or Killed by Traffic Engineer, which is a research engineer from Colorado State University looking at all the problems with roads, and it's a good document here. But I'll bring you up to, we had this death in Cotati on the other side, somebody walking their dog across a stop sign, and somehow something happened. The dog survived, but the person didn't. we've got these patterns of behavior that happen, and it's how do we really look at those patterns of errors. And I think walking across this junction, because I haven't got a lot of time here, you know, you're walking from the north side, and I know I personally check each direction. So that median on the west side is very important as a protective median. So having that as a reasonable width for protection, somebody with their dog, you know, walking across, or a family, is very, very important. Other places also have this protected nose, and I put it in my documents. It's schematically marked on the documents, but does it really exist? Is it a raised medium is my question on there, and exactly, is it going to be a protective medium? We have them, typically these protected noses.
30 seconds.
You will see them in other parts, particularly the mid-block crossings. They have them on here. This is a bit of dead space, really, on the pavement that this protected nose is in, and I think I'm just asking, is it raised? Are the documents now, or can they in the future, or can the Planning Commission recommend that that be a raised medium, and that width of the medium be at least, the documented in the designs was 6 feet, and it seems like that's a reasonable thing to ask for a minimum of 6 feet, that it you know, the designs that are in there. So I do have a lot of other stuff that I've put in my comment, but I think that's about it for what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla, is Lori back on?
Yes, thank you. Lori, you have the floor. Sorry about that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to summarize my written comment. My parents went before the council in 1977 about this West Katati turn, and I hope it gets changed in my lifetime. The other thing is you need more public input than this. The September meeting had Neil and I as the only commenters. Last year, there was 5 of us. One of them was Neil, one was Eris Weaver, one was Lori Ann Barber, one from the Commons, and me. That's not enough for this major intersection on the west side. So you need either Caltrans or you guys, it shouldn't go forward without more public input because nobody even knows about it. The other thing, I always thought, and I always heard that the right of way for Caltrans was so that they'd have 2 lanes all the way down to Stony Point from Redwood, and now you're going to commit it to 1 lane. It already backs up past West Katati Avenue during commute, and that's gonna cause a lot of problems. The other thing is the bike lane on the south side. The south side, nobody walks there. There are 3 different ways to get from like Stony Point to downtown Katati. Nobody takes the highway. They take either West Sierra, they go through my neighborhood to West School where it goes under the pedestrian bridge, or the people in my neighborhood walk in the trail that is owned by the HOA that goes behind. There should not be a bicycle lane there. The buses, there's one in front of the quarry. I have never ever seen anybody. I have never ever seen anybody stand there, or I've rarely seen a bike. So, last thing is there's quicksand basically on West Katati Avenue. They've had a couple problems. Katati Hotel, that whole thing because of the sandy loam soil and underground rivers. So you need to test there needs to be studies that South Park can handle the traffic load. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Questions from the commission?
Yeah, I'll ask questions about the nose. Out of curiosity, and I know that you are only at a 35% right now for design. Do you know about how wide the median will be and if the nose will be raised?
Yes, the median is 6 feet at that location, and it will have a raised curb at the end. So you can imagine the median extending out and then cutting out a 5-foot section for that, or larger, wider, for the pathway to come through. But it'll leave a piece of raised median at the end.
What a perfect place to have something of beauty or art or something. Has aesthetics been incorporated or thought of for that section?
We are considering landscaping at this time, and our typical view of that is to keep it low maintenance because Public Works will be maintaining it. But an accent point or something, I mean, it is going to be very visible at that location.
I can't wait to see what you all come up with, or if you want to have some kind of artistic representation from the city. I don't know. It seems like such a good opportunity.
Anyone else?
I guess on that note, do you know when we would see kind of what would go there as far as landscaping or in that raised median? Would that be at the next 65?
We have an idea what doesn't work. You know, large trees, large shrubs that might overgrow that area. So for a median that size, we're looking at low ground cover. That's slow growing, but it'll flower. So that median area will receive irrigation, but it's going to be a low ground cover type treatment.
Is there, from a traffic safety perspective, is there any consideration put into putting something a little larger there? Like Neil gave some examples in his email of different kind of protective barriers, you know, to help protect the pedestrians in that center median from cars.
I'll refer to James to answer that.
So typically, most of the larger type barriers that were referred to, most of those are in pretty urban areas. In most suburban areas that we see here, sometimes we'll put a delineator there to make sure it's seen. But the concern is you need to have overwhelming pedestrian traffic to kind of offset the possibility of a car jumping the curb when no pedestrians are there. They need to be going pretty high speed to do that, but what'll happen is a car will jump the curb, and then if they hit that barrier, now we have a crash instead of the car just getting away. And so there's kind of a trade-off evaluation there of, do we have enough pedestrians going forward that we need to protect them that much versus, you know, do we cause the damage to the car? Because, you know, cars can jump the curb and they can drive away, but if there's a big barrier there and they accidentally hit that or they scrape by it, now we have a real accident that, you know, cars are pretty damaged by. So there's a trade-off in between there that we can evaluate.
Is cost taken into consideration as to why you would or would not put something there? Or is it more from a
It's more of a
risk
safety
perspective?
Yeah, it's more of a safety and a risk perspective of why we do that. Typically speaking, the cost is for some kind of barrier there or some kind of additional pedestrian safety beyond. Again, there's a 6-inch curb there, so any car at low speeds would be protected. It'd have to be a very high-speed car that would not. And so it's typically a safety analysis. Is typically what it is.
What kind of speeds would they have to be traveling at to hop the curb, you think?
Usually it's above 20, I want to say. Again, we're slowing them down as they're coming in, so it'd have to be pretty low volume time. So like think late night or something like that. To have that kind of happen. And again, I can tell you, I constantly see delineators that are put on those ends. They are gone within a few years. So it's kind of it's a real trade-off between, protecting cars and protecting pedestrians and how many we do there. It's a safety analysis, essentially.
Do you know what the posted traffic is through that section?
45.
The speed limit, it's 45. So at that speed limit though, they would hop the curb at that speed.
They would pop the curb, but really eastbound's the one that westbound we'd be expecting them to accelerate through. But yes, they would pop the curb at those speeds. Yes.
Okay. As far as I guess with what Lori said, taking it from keeping it at one lane through the intersection, were there conversations with Caltrans as far as their future planning of maybe opening it up to 2 full lanes through there? Or has it always, have you guys had that conversation with them, and how did that go?
We have not had that particular conversation with them. That will be had as part of our approval process. We'll be submitting what's called an ISO, an intersection evaluation, which has to take into account the planning as well as the city planning is going through it and the shop projects that go through it. That'll be accounted for as we move forward. Yes.
I would just add, we're getting adequate dedication from all the adjacent property owners to ensure future widening can occur, but it's our goal to keep traffic as slow as possible through that location. So we want to maintain that narrow 1-lane road for as long as possible until traffic volumes would need additional width.
Would that be Caltrans that would be widening the road though at that point, or how does that work?
It all depends. So in theory, if it fully develops all the areas around it and maintains 1 lane, then it would be a Caltrans project to come forward and widen it because traffic has gotten so bad on their highway. Mm-hmm. If the properties weren't to develop and we, for some reason, got huge amounts of traffic coming through, the city could ask those adjacent property owners to widen as a part of their project. But it's not likely that the city would ever push to widen that road in any foreseeable future.
Outside of just, so there has been communication then with those landowners, property owners through that corridor there?
Yeah, because through the development review process, we refer those projects to Caltrans. We have traffic studies on each individual one, and we coordinate with them on this effort to design the roadway intersection improvements, so they build it into their project designs.
With the median going up there, I guess, are there properties that wouldn't be able to take a left-hand turn out of their driveway as they, maybe they would have beforehand, and kind of what, have there been conversations or what's been done to address that?
There will be some properties that are limited in their ability to turn left on both sides if the median gets installed. I can't speak to exactly which properties have been engaged with, other than the ones that are directly adjacent to the development projects that we've had.
Are there going to be U-turns allowed at that intersection?
No, U-turns, I believe are not going to be allowed there. They would just have to use alternative routes to, circle back around.
Yeah. So how would that look then? Is there a U-turn down at the further intersection at, what is that, Redwood Drive? Is a U-turn allowed there?
They could make a left on Redwood Drive, make a left on Hellman, make a left on Alder Drive, and head out that way towards Sebastopol.
Would it make sense to put a U-turn there? Or is that more of a safety reason as well to not incorporate one?
I believe the width at that location does not permit a U-turn. We're narrowing it down with the bulb outs at either side to try to increase the pedestrian safety. So we did look at U-turns, and it just is not enough space there to make that happen.
And then I believe we talked about funding for the build out. Is that going to be impact fees with the developers, or are we still kind of looking at different options for how to be addressed?
So we've received, we've approval for $1 million of local funds. That's SCTA. And then we have a community project, $1 million grant that we get, that's in the state budget. So we have those, and then this is in collaboration with the developers across the street there on the north side. And if CV1 and CV2 were to come in, I believe that's over $2 million of impact fees. And then Redwood Row would be a third development, which would, so those are the
duty to get it correct. And so I'm hoping that we decide to go that way. And thank you, Neil, for your diligence. And that's it for now.
Craig, if we notice in the future that we need to lengthen the amount of time for the light to allow pedestrians to walk across, we can do that? Or is that something we have to go through Caltrans to get okayed?
That's a good question. I think, I mean, we have other traffic signals in our jurisdiction. The one at Redwood Drive is operated by, the one at the on-ramp is operated by Caltrans. I think that's something we bring up with Caltrans and open up that discussion with them on who's got control over the safety timing features.
Okay.
I don't want to just give you an answer I don't know, or the answer to.
I know we had to, the city had to get Mike Kearns at the time, Board of Supervisors, involved just to get a turn lane onto Madrone, which unfortunately was accomplished after major accidents at that intersection. So hopefully Caltrans will take safety into consideration as to what we recommend. I like the idea of the nose. I worry that overplanting or even an art installation could be a distraction to drivers. So I would be in favor of simplicity as far as that is concerned. And I know, again, because we're dealing with Caltrans here, what would be involved in getting Caltrans to start slowing down the speed limit, say starting at Madrone or just before Madrone to this proposed new intersection? Because I know it's currently 45, but when you're coming up to stoplights and everything, it's...
Speeds are a function of the roadway, and which means that cars will go how fast they feel comfortable going. And so anything at the 85 percentile, that is the speed limit. We can't just change it to 30 or 35 without being supported by that 85th percentile traffic study. So this project with the median, the raised median, and the delineated traffic lanes and the left turn pockets and the signalized intersection will slow traffic down through that section. And so what we would typically do after major roadway improvements like this is do a traffic safety study and see if we can get up 35 mile per hour or lower that speed limit through there based on the results.
Yeah, because I know in some areas of Petaluma, they actually did those studies to actually go lower than the recommended speeds in certain areas. And since this is we've got the turnoff going into Madrone, which is where the school is, you're going to have increased pedestrian traffic with the proposed new developments. I think that would be in our favor to try to pursue that, to try to get the feather down the speed on that area. I know it was also suggested that we delay this and have more public hearings. As you stated, this conversation started years ago. It was, I think, a year and a half ago we came before the Planning Commission, and then there was 2 workshops, but there was also a lot of conversation, and this room was packed with a lot of people during one of those conversations when we're looking at the Village 1 and Village 2, and there was a lot of talk about public safety, about bicycle pathways, about sidewalks. So to delay it more for I don't think it's necessary that we need to delay a decision. I think we've had adequate conversation over the years with the community. Personally, I'd love to see more people show up at meetings, but everybody's busy and running in 27 different directions. I appreciate the comments that we get from people that attend the meetings and that, you know, send in letters and comment online. So we have a lot of avenues for people to participate. Are there any other questions? Can I have a motion, please?
Just put in a recommendation that they consider protected nodes there.
So noted. You can make the motion?
Just to note, if I may, you can suggest having the nose put in the design, but it's going to be up to Caltrans for the ultimate decision.
I would like to make a motion that the planning commission receive the presentation on the 35% complete Highway 116 West Cotati Avenue intersection safety improvements project and provide input in their role as the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Is that correct?
We have a second?
Is
Yes.
this something we really need a motion for? I mean, we received,
Well, we're making-
it, and then we put input.
Clarification?
Yeah, there's no resolution, but I think you guys can do the vote, especially given that we are asking for recommendations. So I think you could vote without having a formal resolution, especially given that there's some formal direction coming from the commission. If that's unanimously supported, I do think that's appropriate and helpful.
Thank you.
Then
So
I'll
we-
second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Carla, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Berman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moffett,
Aye.
Chair Delardy.
Aye. Motion carries.
And staff would just clarify, that's with the recommendation for a 6-foot median width and protected nose on the crosswalk sides of the median. I believe that's it, correct? Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. On to item 2, ADU ordinance update.
Hey, good evening, Vice Chair Gilardi and members of the Planning Commission. This item is a public hearing, and our recommendation to you to make a recommendation to the City Council to adopt an ordinance that will amend and update our ADU code section. Next slide, please. So as you know, ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. State legislation that addresses ADU development, specifically targeted at increasing the number of ADUs in the state, began in about 2016. And like a lot of California state housing legislation addressing housing development, the primary mechanism was to reduce local control over that development. We adopted our first ADU ordinance in 2020. That's actually our first and only ADU ordinance. And it primarily mirrored what the state law said. And I will say here, the state law is voluminous related to ADUs and extremely complex and confusing. So our ADU ordinance, though, picked out the pieces that were required and set them forth, reiterating the state law. Since that time, there have been a number of changes to the state law, a number of pieces of legislation that have changed the way that ADUs can be regulated. And as a consequence, our ADU ordinance is now inconsistent. Not completely inconsistent, but in a number of ways is inconsistent with the state law. We need to address that. We do expect that there will continue to be changes, legislative actions that will change the ADU law. And we anticipate that what those would mean is that our existing ordinance would become more inconsistent over time, or to address that, we might need to spend staff time and decision maker time continually updating the ordinance. Fortunately, we believe there is actually another way, which is to adopt a new ordinance, which is very streamlined and essentially refers back to most of the provisions of the state law without reiterating every single one of them, and really just focuses on the parts of the state law over which we actually have some control, which is pretty, just a few points, really. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about how the law has changed since we adopted our ordinance, and this is the high points here. Changes in height have been significant, whereas previously the lowest height limit that the cities were allowed to set was 16 feet according to state law. We couldn't set any height limit lower than that. Now the minimum height can be 18 feet. Again, that's the lowest that we can set for any ADUs that are within a half mile of the SMART station or located on a multifamily property. Similarly, now the lowest height limit we can set for attached ADUs is 25 feet. So those are attached to the primary dwelling. In addition, now front setback requirements may not stand in the way of the development of at least an 800 square foot ADU on any property, which essentially means that if an ADU can't be built elsewhere on the property, then we need to allow it in the front setbacks. Which is not something that's been the case previously. Now 3 ADUs are allowed on a single family property. Previously it was 2, 1 JADU, 1 interior ADU, and that means an ADU that is fully contained within the existing structure of a primary dwelling, but can be bigger than a JADU, which is a junior ADU, which is 500 square feet, and then 1 detached ADU up to 800 square feet is guaranteed by the state law. There's also an amnesty for unpermitted or non-conforming ADUs. They can't be denied a permit. Owner occupancy of ADUs is no longer mandatory, although it is still required for JADUs, at least somewhere on the property, and there's stricter timelines for city approval of ADU applications now. Next slide, please. There are more changes coming along. These laws were approved this year and take effect in January. SB 1211 raises the number of detached ADUs on an existing multifamily property that's allowable from 2 to 8. In addition, any uncovered and off-street parking spaces that are removed to create, make way for an ADU do not need to be replaced elsewhere on the site. With AB 2533 really relates to the amnesty for ADUs, and so for unpermitted ADUs, so it extends that to JADUs, bless you, and changes the cutoff date for that amnesty for the construction of those units from January 2018 to January 2020. Next slide, please. So, as I said, most of the aspects of the state law related to ADUs don't really provide us any latitude. They say this is the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about that. Just as an example, fire sprinklers, for instance, the state law says that an ADU, a jurisdiction may not require an ADU to have fire sprinklers unless the primary unit also already has fire sprinklers installed. The state law is very prescriptive related to what is a JADU. They can be up to 500 square feet, and they always need to have a deed restriction included. And that's, there's no way that the city can interact with those regulations except to enforce them. There is a handful of things that we can regulate. Among those are some limits on ADU size, and these first 3 are restrictions that we have had in place. And the first is limiting an ADU of up to 50% of the square feet of the primary dwelling, as long as we allow at least 800 square feet of ADU. We can limit studio or 1-bedroom ADUs to 850 square feet, and ADUs that are 2 or more bedrooms to 1,000 square feet. And we can set a total cap on the size of ADUs at 1,200 square feet. So these are what the state allows us, and this is what we actually have been doing. What's new is we may also choose to cap ADUs at 2 stories, regardless of the height limit in feet. We can also, we are not allowed to prohibit parking for ADUs in setbacks, but we may regulate the nature of that placement of that parking. And our code actually does do that at this time between single-family and multifamily parking requirements. We can set a minimum rental period of 30 days to make sure that they are actual long-term housing and not vacation rentals. And we can set certain setbacks and height limits as long as they're not more than 4 feet as far as setbacks go, and within those 16, 18, or 25-foot height limits. I would like to note too that these are objective standards. So even if we if the city chooses to use these regulations and enact them in an ordinance, they are considered to be objective standards. So we can fulfill the requirement that we provide objective review of ADUs. Next slide, please. So having said all that, the staff's recommended approach to the ordinance update is to rescind the existing ordinance and start fresh, adopting a new streamlined ordinance that points back to the state law for the bulk of the standards rather than reiterating it. And this ordinance would really only include the provisions over which we have some control that I just described or that are legally necessary. And we think that this will help keep the ordinance more up to date, reduce the amount of time that we might need to make updates as state law continues to change. We do plan to have a summary handout, and this was included in your staff report. And a summary is kind of maybe not the right word because it's many pages long, but is essentially our attempt to clarify and write down all of what the state law standards are and what, if this ordinance is passed, what our requirements would be, so that we can use that as a guide for staff as well as for any members of the public who are interested in building an ADU. Next slide, please. So the highlights of what is in the proposed ordinance, again, this reference to state law, confirmation that we will conduct ministerial non-discretionary review of ADUs. We can review ADUs that don't meet the state law, and we can do that under a discretionary design review process. We can limit ADUs in the front setback to no more than 800 square feet. We're proposing the same square footage limits that we've had in place that are allowed by state law. Next slide, please. Setback and height limits is allowed by state law, the 2-story height limit, the minimum 30-day rental. And we also are proposing to amend some of the definitions we have in our code related to ADUs to clarify that ADUs are not included in the unit count at a property or in the density calculation or the site coverage calculation. We also want to clarify that if a single-family property has ADUs on it, that does not mean that it's become a multifamily property. It's still classified as single-family for the purposes of everything else that we enforce related to our code. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of items we wanted to put out for discussion with the commission and the council that would be sort of policy departures from where we have been in the past. And this is sort of state law aside. One is related to the height of detached ADUs. So as I'd said, 16 feet is really the lowest height limit that we can enforce. And that is allowed if a detached ADU is meets 4-foot setbacks or more. However, there's a provision in the state law that within a half mile of SMART or on a multifamily property, the height limit can be 18 feet. So our proposal is essentially to make that height limit for detached ADUs 18 feet across the board, across the city, for the purposes of simplicity and being able to just make things consistent across the city, and that would still be within a 4-foot setback. It's both. It's the minimum that the state allows, and it would be the maximum that we would allow. Yeah. It would be exactly 18 feet. People could build lower, but 18 feet would be the maximum we would allow.
And I would just add, that's if they want to take advantage of the 4-foot setbacks. If they want to meet the setbacks that are on the, like for the same, for a primary dwelling, the home, single-family home, then they could go to the height limit that's allowed for the single-family home. And then as Autumn talked about, if they wanted to build it as an addition to the main house, then they automatically are already allowed to do 24 feet under. 25 feet
Yeah.
under state law.
Yeah.
So ADUs are allowed, ADUs right now at a maximum height of 16 feet are allowed to do this 4-foot setback reduced, except in a few other circumstances, and then they can do 4-foot setback and go to 18 feet.
Gotcha.
For simplicity, we're saying, should we just go to 18 feet in general? And we think yes.
Yeah, and I want to note, and this is in the staff report, but just to reiterate, the state law also requires that we allow up to 2 feet additional for all ADUs, regardless of what the height limit is. And that is to mirror, more or less, the roof pitch of the primary dwelling. Okay, so that would be an additional 2 feet up to the peak of a peaked roof in order to look more like the primary residence on the property. So in essence, what we would be talking about would be 20 feet potentially, and that's up at the peak of the roof. So the other area we're suggesting as sort of a new direction is related to parking. So the city may require 1 space per ADU, and that is what we have been doing. That's what the law allows. But there's an exception for any property within a half mile of any transit. So not just SMART, but any transit, so any bus line in the city, and for JADUs. So taking those two things together, particularly the transit, there's actually very few places in Cotati where we can enforce that 1 space parking limit. And so our suggestion is to just remove the parking requirement completely. That would provide that consistency citywide in ADU standards, and also be consistent with the new, kind of the progressive new parking standards that the city has recently adopted for multifamily development. So we'd like to hear your feedback on that. Yes, yeah, so as I said, so if someone chooses to remove their parking, and now it can be covered or uncovered parking, so they're parking for their home that we do require, if they choose to remove that to put in an ADU, they're not required to replace it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when we talk about the parking for the property when an ADU is added. Okay, next slide. Okay, so with that, we have a recommendation for you. The Community Development Department recommends that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Cotati Municipal Code in accordance with state law by repealing and replacing Section 17.42.170 and amending Chapter 1790. And with that, I'm available to
Thank you,
answer
Autumn.
the questions.
Is there any questions from the public? Carla, do we have any questions online?
Thank you, Chair Gilardi. Lori, you have the floor.
One thing I was just thinking about, with having the parking within half a mile of a bus stop, that it should be kept, that you have to be required if it, with paratransit with me, I have to be 3/4 of a mile from a bus stop, and I'm right at 3/4 of a mile. And which is over on Maple Avenue. There's all the way down to Richardson Lane and all those, and there's lots of properties with lots of space for ADUs. So I think that the thing of the transit should have its one, but it shouldn't be the whole city has no parking, because as we don't have a lot of street parking out here, because we don't have a lot of sidewalks. So anyways, the other thing is more of a question. With the ADU, like the Gilman Ranch one 2 weeks ago, the ADU is being built before the main house. Is there anything in the state that's coming through that how long the main house has to be built, like say within 10 years? Because then you're getting over into tiny house regulations rather than ADU. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Is there any time limits by the state as far as when you build an ADU versus when you build the main house?
Yeah, an ADU is meant to be accessory to the primary dwelling, and there is a requirement that the certificate of occupancy for an ADU not be issued before that of the primary dwelling. However, there is not, it is possible, I believe, for a unit to be built on a property and then become the ADU. That a larger dwelling could be built later, and in effect, the initial dwelling becomes the ADU, even if that is not actually what was necessarily intended originally, or even if it was. I believe that that's a protected action. You know, and by that same token, you know, we are allowing people to, you know, to do ADU conversions of any number of accessory types of structures that they have on their properties as well. And you know, there's a protection against for, you know, there's amnesty for ADUs that are built without permits. So there's a lot of latitude in the state law to make the ADUs become available housing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, Cotati doesn't have a minimum home size. So if somebody comes forward to build their ADU first, we treat it as a single-family home. So they have to pay all the impact fees, they have to do all of the requirements that would be put on a single-family home, and then when they come forward with the primary home, assuming that they do, then they get a credit that they paid for the ADU towards that.
Thank you. Question from the commission?
You know, I don't see a problem with removing the parking requirement and creating it to be consistent, because otherwise I'm seeing y'all have to get out the transit maps each time and try to map exactly where half a mile is. Bus routes change constantly, and most properties who are outside of a half-mile radius of any bus stop are probably a little bit larger properties. That's why they don't have sidewalks, and they have plenty of space for cars, tractors, etc. So, yeah. That's my opinion. I don't think so.
Shelley, Ryan?
When there's going to be 8 ADUs allowed on a property, what is there a size of the property that needs to be met for there to be 8 ADUs on it? Is there a minimum size?
You know, it's not based on the lot size, and we ourselves would not be able to regulate that because ADUs are not part of the density count. But there is a formula. Let me just look it up really quick. The ADUs are numbered, so the total number is 8, but the actual number is based on a percentage.
The 8 is only for multifamily properties, so that's only
Yeah.
existing apartment properties are allowed to add additional units up to 8 ADUs based on this formula that Autumn's going to talk about.
Okay, yeah, and that's actually 8 detached ADUs. the number of ADUs may not exceed the number of existing units on the lot. Okay, so that makes sense. Sorry, I'm just trying to parse through this really quickly here. If the ADUs are going to be included within the walls of the existing multifamily structures, then those are limited to 25% of the existing number of units on the property, with a minimum of 1 being allowed. So, yeah, so it could be up to 8 detached ADUs regardless of the size of the property, as long as there are at least 8 primary units within that multifamily dwelling.
Woo-hoo.
Ryan?
Just one question. Has there been consideration as far as how this ordinance would adjust with changes to the state law, so that we don't have to come back and keep readjusting it as state law changes?
Yeah, so that's the goal here, is to strip out what we have no control over whatsoever, or what we don't deem legally necessary. And, you know, one of the first provisions in the ordinance is refer to state law. So our goal is to make the document more durable over time. We probably will end up updating it some. But we have this interpretation document, which is our read on this complex law, and this is all the things that you can do. And that's a guidance and interpretation document, so that we can update. That we can update without coming to the decision makers. It's just us reading the state law and going, oh, they changed this year, so we need to change what we say we can allow. Unless that impacts what our ordinance says, in which case then we do need to go through this process again.
Well, thank you, because that answered my other question I had. I like the idea of streamlining and simplifying. I think that's great. I'm in favor of changing the 16 to 18, because that's going to eliminate confusion and possible conflicts between one neighbor and another neighbor, depending on how they do things. So I think that's a good move in the right direction. Any additional comments, questions?
Well, looking down the road, if we're going to be, these ADUs can pop up like bushes. So it seems like we're going to have pop-ups all over, ADU pop-ups everywhere. And parking will be an issue. We don't have enough parking where I live right now. They're parking in empty lots, and it's tough to find parking. We know this. And if our goal is ultimately to get folks out of the cars, 20 plus years ago, when the council sat here and voted on a smart train station, I thought, what the hell are you doing, voting on a smart train station when there is no train? But they knew there was going to be a train. There was a vision. So we're looking down the road, and I'm trying to figure out how to get folks out of the car and how to actually have some transit available to our Cotati residents. And if that means looking down the road and into the future and figuring out how we at least have something in our town that takes people places that they go, that goes around, takes folks to Oliver's, takes folks over to Kaiser in Rohnert Park, takes them places, then we can get people out of cars. And if we're going to have pop-ups everywhere and more people coming, we need to figure out how to get them out of the car. And also, I would love if we could find a way to have free transit, period. It runs. It should be free for everybody. And we should figure out how to do that so people actually do it. And we have it run more often, so it's reliable and something that we can do. So I'm just trying to look down the road. We're not going to have anything about parking. Well, there will be more cars. There will be, and people will be fighting for parking with these pop-ups everywhere. So, hey, let's just set the popcorn popper and pop them. Oh, here we go, 18-foot popcorn. Beautiful and nice. It's nice that we have grown. We're the town that grew the most in these 10 years, 4-point-something%. Yay us, because we're doing something right here. This town people want to come to, and let's make it safe for everybody, and accommodating and accessible, and good for us. Great. Wonderful.
Have you seen Rosie the trolley over in Santa Rosa?
No.
It's a little trolley, and it's around on Wednesday night markets, so you can hop on and go around and hop off. It's super cute. Just future thoughts.
And future technology, they'll probably all be driverless. So are there any additional comments? All right, thank you, Autumn. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Do you want me to move?
Please.
I move that we have a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Cotati recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance amending Title 17 Land Use of the Cotati Municipal Code in accordance with state law by repealing and replacing Section 17.42.170 accessory dwelling units / junior accessory dwelling units and amending Section 17.90.090 definitions of specialized terms and phrases.
Thank you. Could we have a second?
I'll second that.
Carla, can we have roll call?
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Berman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moffett,
Aye.
Chair Gilardi.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 9, staff report.
Thank you, Chair Gilardi, Commission. We have a lot going on in the department as we head into the end of 2024. We are starting to talk about strategic planning. The council has a facilitated meeting internally for them to kind of talk about their plans for the next fiscal year. The next basically fiscal year process, so July 1st, 2025, will be a 2-year budget cycle. So the council has approved that. We're moving into that. That's a new process for us. So we're just now starting to think about things for our work plan for that 2-year cycle. And then as a part of that, we're taking stock of what we have and haven't accomplished for our work plan in for this current fiscal year. So staff anticipates coming back to the commission with a summary of kind of, here's what we committed to doing, here's where we are, here's what we see into the future. So just know that that'll happen in early 2025. But right now, part of kind of taking care of some of the things we've committed to, the Santero Way specific plan draft is out and available for public review and comment. Both the EIR, so the environmental analysis of the document, and the document itself, the plan, that's available on the city's website. We've emailed it out to all the interest groups that have expressed interest, and we're asking for comments by December 16th. So please provide those comments directly to me. nhoush@cotadicity.org is my email. I'm happy to take phone call, comment, whatever's best for anybody. We'd love to hear from people. We're also holding a neighborhood meeting to discuss the 120 East Cotati Avenue 100% affordable housing project. That meeting is in this chamber tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., 6 to 7:30, and architectural designs will be proposed. There's a couple different drafts, and the developer's asking for input, and then that will be brought back to the city council, and we're trying for the planning commission, but we might need a special meeting, so look for a email out on that. But right now, it's tentatively scheduled to go before the city council on December 10th, after tomorrow night's meeting, where we're going to talk to the community about the design. There's new rental assistance, and I would actually call it
Oh,
just,
excuse me, no, I think the meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, not Tuesday.
Sorry. It is Wednesday. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. 11/20. So November 20th, 6 to 7:30 here in the council chamber. My apologies. I was at the wrong meeting saying tomorrow. But yeah, so there will be to discuss the conceptual architectural designs and ask for additional input. Wednesday, November 20th, 6 to 7:30 in the council.
And she brought us dinner.
She
the
did bring
last
food
time.
last time. She did bring food.
She
last
did.
time. Yes. And then, so there's a new financial assistance program out that the city is getting to participate in. So it's called Keeping People Housed. And this was a really large grant that COTS went after out of Petaluma, a nonprofit out of Petaluma. They were able to get Sonoma County several $100,000 for a 2-year pilot program. And the idea is people who are potentially on the verge of having a financial event that would push them into homelessness to, get involved in that before that happens to help them stay housed. And so it will provide free financial assistance and legal support to eligible households, rent, utilities, eviction notices, emergency needs. I mean, even something like a car repair. If that has a significant impact on your ability to get to work and therefore pay your rent and stay in your home, that would be eligible for this program. The money is anticipated to start flowing mid-December, but they can take referrals now. And this is, people can apply at keepingpeoplehoused.org. So KEEP. Well, what's interesting is I'm not sure. Mine says there is no 2 P's there. But keeppeoplehoused.org, or you can contact COTS, the Committee on Shelterless, and Petaluma at kph@cots.org. That's the email. Or at 707-244-9685. And as I said, the funding is anticipated to begin flowing in mid-December. So we're going to have links to that on the city's housing page, and we're going to do social media blasts. It's going to be in the newsletter. We're going to be using all of our tools to get the word out, but just know that program is available, and we hope it really can help a lot of people. And then the last thing I'll mention is we had a neighborhood meeting last Wednesday here in the council chamber to talk about the Lasker Lane project. So 12 single-family homes proposed up on Lasker Lane, each of them with a JADU and an ADU, so 36 total units. We had a packed room. Really appreciate everybody showing up. That meeting was recorded, so if you weren't able to attend that meeting, it's on the city's YouTube channel, and the plans are available on the projects in progress page, so people can go there and check it out. It's a pretty innovative design. A lot of people were supportive of the design, but concerned about the density in that established neighborhood. And with that, that concludes my department report.
Thank you. Any reports by commissioners?
I have questions.
Okay.
When you're looking at strategic planning, do you ever look at just kind of general beautification projects to, ensure that our city is one that's beautiful and well-loved and a proud place for all of us to be? And if you do, it would be great if there were some consideration of, I know that Craig doesn't have that kind of blank lot over there by Myrtle and Old Redwood as a construction lot anymore, but something, even if it's hardscaped, that is nice, would be great. Also a good spot for artwork, too. Throw that out there again. Oh, and do you anticipate meetings in December?
So we're trying to look at that right now. So I was just told today, we were planning on having a meeting on December 16th. I was just told today this chamber, the audiovisual upgrade project will have started by then. And so we likely can't meet here on the 16th, which was why we may not be able to present the 120 East Cotati Avenue project to you on the schedule we were thinking. So right now, that meeting is likely to be canceled. But as I mentioned, we may have a special meeting request if the commission is interested in getting an individual presentation on the 120 East Cotati Avenue. If the commissioners are comfortable just reviewing the meeting with the planning or with the city council, providing comments in writing, coming to that meeting to get that presentation, or maybe watching it, then that would be an alternative where we could avoid a meeting. And I'm not sure about December 2nd yet, but we will know, I think, by the end of this week.
Shelley, Ryan? I attended the Lasker Lane workshop. I was impressed by the number of people that showed up. There was 50, 60 people here, which was great. And staff did a great job, communicating what we have say over and what the state has say over that we don't have say over. I thought it was interesting. It was kind of funny, actually. A number of people were concerned about traffic, which is understandable. And they were commenting about how many people in their neighborhood run the stoplights and don't stop there. And it's the people that live there that are doing it. So they're concerned about future traffic, but they're have an issue that they're dealing with, or I don't know if they actually are dealing with right now. So that was interesting, but there was a lot of really good comments and conversation, and the developers that were here that night, I thought, did a really nice job of explaining their vision for their project. So I thought that went very well. So thank you. As far as information received after the agenda was posted, we had 2 letters that we were all given copies of. And other than that, I think that'll do it tonight. So this meeting is adjourned.